That after the credits scene of Noblesse episode 2 had me dying. I love the idea of this big confrontation between M21 and one of the new characters, one of the new nobles that we get introduced to, and it's just them honestly upset over who got the bigger room. And we have our boy trying to take the high ground, saying you can have the bigger room, and it just becomes another headache for our boy Frankenstein. And Frankenstein had quite a few headaches in this week's episode, and I loved it. I mean, I have to say, Noblesse Awakening, the OVA, which I am very happy to say that Crunchyroll is now properly promoting it. Wherever you go on Noblesse, whether it's you're watching the episode or you're on the page to choose which episode, it tells you to watch the OVA first, which I'm happy about because there was definitely some confusion because if you jump into last week, it's literally episode 2. But I'm happy to say that this week's episode is definitely matching the quality that I felt like the OVA had. Obviously, the OVA wasn't as hilarious as the current anime is, but I do think the more serious subject matter and the storytelling that we saw in the OVA is definitely alive and well in this week's episode, and really has me excited for the remainder. I mean, I thought with the OVA and last week's episode, it was a really great start, and I thought had a lot of potential. After seeing episode 2 of Noblesse, I can safely say that this could become one of my personal favorites of the webtoon anime. I mean, it's already in my second spot out of the 3 that we've had, but I think if it continues to move forward and more, this could be my personal favorite. Only time will tell, but I'm really happy to see how the quality is continuing right now. They give you a lot of lore, they give you a lot of backstory about what characters like Hsieh are, which are nobles, which I thought they were just straight up vampires, but seemingly not. What they are is pretty much almost like guardians of humanity. They look at people weaker than themselves as those to be protected, and it's very interesting how the difference of culture now, because humans have grown to such a new degree. For a lot of these characters, like we get introduced to 2 new nobles who kind of look like twins to me. I'm going to assume they are, but nonetheless, they are pretty much just trying to protect humanity, and when there are, brawls and things like that, they want to jump in, where characters like M21 or even our main character Hsieh aren't doing anything because they know that this guy, our boy, red-headed fiery fist of doom, can take a punch and can take care of business. And it's kind of weird to think that he's not superhuman because he does some pretty incredible things, and it's quite interesting the kind of like topics and ideas that they put in your head in this episode, especially considering how they end the episode saying like, this isn't the same humanity that you once saw. They no longer need to be protected, they can protect themselves, which is, I think, both true and false all wrapped up into one. It's definitely true with how the episode sort of ends with the fisticuffs there. Of course, they didn't need to intervene, but if you look at the OVA, which caused this man to have a broken arm, you definitely needed our boy Hsieh to come in. So I think there definitely needs to be a blend, but it's very interesting considering when these people were awake versus now when they're awake. It was humans, worshipping them, begging for them to protect them, where now humans can mostly do it themselves with some intervention here and there. I like the idea of that because I definitely think some nobles will take that easier than others. I feel like characters like Hsieh are very much okay with now blending in with seemingly normal society, which is why we get basically funny scenes where you have him just kind of in awe of ramen and waiting for his ramen to separate, and it kind of creeps out people. He's enjoying high school life, and while it's not something everyone's going to enjoy, some people will say, oh, I want to see the nobles just want to protect humanity and then maybe get corrupted by it, which I'm sure we will see with some of them. But at the end of the day, I really like the idea because it gives us a very interesting blend, and I'm really happy with this episode because they blended lore, action, darker themes with the comfy. The main comfy came from Frankenstein's headache. By inserting these characters, at first he was playing along because they thought he was a normal human, so he played along with the brainwashing. But when he sees them in their home, he's getting frustrated, he's getting just anxious, and then he starts spilling the tea when they say, oh, you should just live here. It's very hilarious to see those moments because characters like Hsieh are just like kind of chilling. He knows who they are. There's no way he doesn't. If they can recognize that his aura is similar to their own, there's no way that he doesn't recognize the same thing. But it's a matter of, I feel like he's the type of character who recognizes that in this day and age, they're pretty much okay, and when a threat comes that they can't deal with, I will take care of it, and I'll wipe their memory so they don't remember it. I think that's quite an interesting concept, especially considering you have the Union who, it's hard to tell when they're going to pop up, what they're going to do. I thought this episode was going to start off with the Union, but instead we got more nobles. It's very interesting. I think they have a lot of room to really flesh out the stories, and that's what I said with my first impressions of episode 1 last week. If you just watch episode 1, you're not going to really have any connection, but with the connection to the OVA, there's a lot of promise with the story. The whole idea of a noble waking up from a coffin, from his slumber, and then kind of getting wrapped up into general school life. Why is he doing that? And then what's going to happen when those normal people get wrapped up into supernatural business? Well, he kicks some ass, he takes some names, and then he wipes their memories. I love the idea that Noblesse is definitely blending a lot of things that not everyone is going to enjoy, but I feel like this show, because of how episode 1 was structured and there wasn't that proper promotion for the OVA like there was in Japan, it gave the wrong first impressions, which probably caused review bombing and things like that. But I think anyone who checks out episode 2 after watching the OVA and episode 1 probably are going to really enjoy this and see the potential, because the pacing, I really feel like it's tight. It doesn't feel like they're rushing to get to places like with the previous webtoon adaptations. It feels to me like they have their time to literally have them sitting in the cafeteria joking about eating food, and they're just, the cultural differences. Then you have the lore, then you have the action, then you have the unique confrontations with this new noble in M21. Then you have the simple scenes with Frankenstein. Like, there's so many things happening in this episode, but it doesn't feel like it's 5 minutes worth of content because they rushed through it so fast. This felt like a good 22-minute episode, and it felt like everything that happened, it didn't need to be sped up or slowed down. It was the proper pace, and that's something that these adaptations haven't had so far, is proper pacing. They've sometimes had proper pacing, but not consistently, and even though last week's episode wasn't a great first episode, when you consider it to be a literal episode 2, the pacing was good for what it attempted to be, but this episode really does blend the OVA and episode 1 together in such a beautiful way that really has me excited. And I honestly really like the presentation. It was very interesting how they were detailing the eyes and the more glow effects. I really like, it looks demonic, you think you shouldn't trust them, but then when you take into consideration Rizal, it's like, okay, I see what's going on here. And they definitely had their fun with the more intensity. And I think even though it definitely looks like an early 2000s anime with how the color palette and the lighting is used in the general scenes, I think it does work well in terms of a contrast for when it does get more demonic and twisted, so you don't really expect it and you feel like it's out of place because this is seemingly a normal environment, but now we have nobles in the Union and modified humans all clashing together into what's going on. To me, I definitely think Noblesse has a lot of potential. Is this going to be slept on more? Probably for maybe a little bit, but I think it's going to start picking up again once people really get the idea that watch the OVA and then continue, because really the OVA having to watch that before this is no different than us having to watch the Demon Slayer movie before we're going to be able to watch Demon Slayer Season 2, because that is literal continuation. The only issue was that in the West it wasn't marketed properly, unlike in Japan where they aired Noblesse Awakening before they aired episode 1 of Noblesse. So I'm glad Crunchyroll fixed their mistakes, which generally when there's some sort of backlash or confusion, they generally do correct it pretty quickly, so I'm happy that they did. I think this is going to be great. This is definitely a very fun show that, honestly, I recommend that if you haven't watched the OVA yet and you're like, yeah, I get it, and yeah, I got some more information, definitely re-binge these episodes. Maybe you don't want to do that. Hell, I've already seen the OVA before I watched episode 1, but after my review later on that night, I rewatched the OVA and episode 1 together, and they were even better in that connection. And I really enjoyed it. I'm really excited for this one. I think the character personalities are fun. I love the idea of old meets new, old personality interacting with just simple things like ramen or cell phones. It's funny. And then you get that real interesting story with the Union and the nobles, and they did a great job with the cultural history. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Did you enjoy it, or do you still find it to be a little bit of a letdown? Whatever you're feeling, of course, let me know. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.